Good afternoon to everyone. Today my group and I will be presenting about why is Medan Pasar Square important as a place-making feature. We will first talk about the abstract, following it with an introduction, conceptual framework, then proceeding to the research questions, and finally the conclusion. Now, let's start with the abstract. The purpose of this study is to find out why Medan Pasar Square is an important place-making feature by comparing another square, which we chose the Merdeka Square. The historical significance, function, and heritage architecture were evaluated to determine the place-making feature. Since they are both KL's greatest historical location and have rich histories before and last till this day, many people will go to these two squares to explore as well, but of course for different reasons. Therefore, it would be interesting to compare them both. The architecture is rich and beautiful too. These are what makes the squares unique from each other, but still play a very important part in place-making feature.
A square is an area framed by buildings and an area designed to exhibit its buildings to the greatest advantage. In simpler words, squares act as a focal point for social and cultural life in the city. Public squares are important elements of a city design with different shapes and sizes. It is the way of designing a good setting for public and commercial buildings in cities. The unique relationship between the open area of the square, the surrounding buildings, and the sky above creates a genuine emotional experience. The type of spaces that usually surround a square are the principal meeting places, a place for ceremonial occasions, and places for entertainment, such as theaters, cinemas, and cafes. Squares are the natural locale for community activities and representation. In addition, squares serve as a public realm and environment for surrounding buildings. They are places where people can meet and socialize. Sometimes squares already exist. However, it can be shaped according to its users and occupants of space. In conclusion, squares serve meaning to a city while providing open-ended activities that capture the beauty of it.
So, the title for our conceptual framework is Square as a Place-Making Feature, and we choose Medan Pasar Square as our main landmark by comparing with Merdeka Square. Now, let me explain more deeply about why is Medan Pasar Square important as a place-making feature and what is the relationship between Medan Pasar Square and Merdeka Square. Let's proceed to question 1. How does Medan Pasar Square's historical significance play in place-making feature? In 1850, Kuala Lumpur is a Malay state which led by King Abdullah, and Medan Pasar is then a small Malay village by the Klang River. At that time, King Abdullah was hired Chinese laborers to open a bigger tin mine. However, the capital of Selangor has relocated from Klang Kuala Lumpur in 1880. So, Medan Pasar became a place of tin trading center but also a gambling hub, known by the old Chinese community as Macau Street or Hokkien Street. When Yap Allah headed Medan Pasar, the township was built with the timber in utilitarian style which provide the basic living shelters to tin miners and business activities. But after the massive fire in Kuala Lumpur during 1881, which named as Great Fire of 1881, Frank Swettenham, the British president, required Alloy's township to be demolished. Yap Alloy rebuilt his market according to the requirements of the materials and building system, and he was able to construct more floors by incorporating Southern Chinese house architecture with more updated construction methods that are safer, which involve using brick instead of timber. Medan Pasar had been established where boats offloaded their goods from their journey from Port Klang and the outside world. By the state Yap Alloy owned the land and market, he did operated a piggery, abattoir and workshop to raise the economic level of Medan Pasar. After the disastrous fire in 1881, the British President Frank Swettenham mandated that building had to be constructed from bricks and tiles while thatching roofing was subsequently banned. The flourishing market was then relocated by Swettenham to where the current Central Market is. After Yap Alloy's death, the old marketplace was transformed into a new trade square. So how about the historical significance for Merdeka Square? In the early days of Kuala Lumpur, the Chinese and Malay communities were settled along the east bank of the Klang River and the west of the river was land originally owned by Yap Aloy and there was used as a farm to plant vegetables. In the midnight of 30 August 1957, the British flag was lowered and the Malayan flag was raised for the first time at the Padang. The ceremony for Malayan independence was then held at the Merdeka Stadium in the morning of 31st August 1957. The Padang was renamed Dataran Merdeka or Merdeka Square in October 1989. Until now, Merdeka's Day Parade will normally be held here on 31st August every year. In 1897, the government office were relocated from Bukit Aman to the Sultan Abdul Samad building overlooking the square. The building is one of the most significant landmarks built by the British and was designed by A.C. Normans, R.A.J. Bidwell and A.P. Hubback in a neo-Mughal style of architecture. This building housed the Selangor State Secretariat and later the Supreme Court before the court was moved, and the building was left unused for a few years. It is now houses for the Ministry of Heritage, Culture and Arts. Next, I will pass it to my groupmate.
Thank you, Andy. Now I will be talking about research question 2. Starting with the years before Malaysia gained its independence, Medan Pasar Square was firstly established by Kapitan Yap as the centre of township in the late 19th century. From there, a chain reaction had occurred where businesses like piggery, workshops and more was then established, making Medan Pasar Square a place of business. Since there were businesses formed, international banks were also seen to establish their first branches over here, thus creating Medan Pasar Square as a banking area. Apart from that, findings have also mentioned that Medan Pasar Square was also a source of entertainment, as opium dens and brothels were present at that time too. Onto Merdeka Square before Malaysia gained its independence. As previously mentioned, Merdeka Square firstly started off as a field, which then means that the function of Merdeka Square at that time is actually a private field used only by the Royal Selangor Club members to play cricket in their leisure time. Continuing with the next timeline point, slight changes in function for both Medan Pasar Square and Merdeka Square can be noticed. For example, existential businesses from the past like medicinal hall and textile shop as well as international banks are still available in Medan Pasar Square but in limited numbers. In addition to that, Medan Pasar Square at that time has also started to become a gathering place for locals to go about their daily lives due to its spacious area. Moving over to Merdeka Square now, contrast with its role previously, Merdeka Square has now become a public field in conjunction with the Malaysian tourism plan. Therefore, since 1990, Merdeka Square has become an iconic historical site in KL that would not miss the tour pamphlet. In addition, due to its spacious street beside the field, the Malaysian government had then made Merdeka Square as a place for public transportation to pick up passengers. Lastly, in present times, Medan Pasar Square is now recognized as a historical site contributing much to the Malaysian tourism sector. Like Merdeka Square, Medan Pasar Square is also now a hub for public transportation where locals can ride the bus, train, taxi or Grab to go elsewhere. Interestingly, following the past years, Medan Pasar Square have recently turned into a place of hosting for events where locals and tourists can observe traditional performances as well as artistic exhibition depending on the organizer. Because of its close approximation to other historical landmarks, Medan Pasar Square does house accommodations like hotel, motels and many more too. Over to the other square, Merdeka Square is now referred as an official venue for the National Day Parade of Malaysia, where the field will host National Day concerts for its citizens to come and celebrate on the eve night of National Day, as well as the starting and end point of the annual marathon event. Speaking of venue, Merdeka Square is also an important venue for the locals to protest their dissatisfaction, for example, the Bersih 2.0 protests. All in all, after comparing the function of both squares, it is clear that both squares, although dissimilar, but they do play a vital role for the community in a significant way till today.
Moving on to question number 3, heritage architecture. The architecture styles of Medan Pasar buildings are influenced by the colonial architecture, environment's needs, and political issues. They have a good mix of Malaysian and Western architecture styles. Though some historical lots were demolished, they were replaced with modern glass blocks. That is not necessarily a bad thing, as it gives Medan Pasar Square such a mixed unique variety that makes the square stands out. The Medan Pasar clock tower in the middle of the square is one of the main attractions people come to see. It was built in 1973 in commemoration of the coronation of King George IV. It has cubism and futurism styles that are complemented by the geometric abstract of rising sun and sunburst. The building styles are mostly influenced by the British architecture culture, which are utilitarian, neoclassical, Art Deco, and the new modern movements.
Medan Square has many architectural styles which influence the buildings around it. We can see Moorish influence, Muslim influence, Mogul influence, and some European style architecture. However, most of the buildings were mostly Islamic influence, whether local or Western Islamic style. We can see buildings like the City Hall, which is Muslim influence, the former High Court, which is Moorish influence, the Sultan Abdul Samad building, which is Mogul influence. Further down the street, there is also St. Mary's Cathedral, which is early English Gothic architecture. Cavious arches and the dome-shaped pavilions on roofs are very much seen at the city or showing us the local Muslim influence. From the Moorish influence buildings, we can see the horseshoe arches that are present on the facade, and the style is actually a Western Islamic based architectural style which was around in countries like Spain and Portugal. In conclusion, we have seen how a square can display characteristics of urban architecture, culture, crowds and activities, and reflects the closeness of people or a community. There is definite need for softscape in the square. The plain and too much of hardscape of the site limits the amount of activities that can be done at the square, and no matter what the shape of the square, there must be at least a central space that connects the rest of the spaces, and people can make use of that space to display the culture of the community, and thus helps develop the cultural industry and display the image or distinctive image of the city. The city government should strive to bring out the cultural atmosphere of the square. Thank you.
That's all from our group. Thank you for listening to us patiently, and we wish you have a nice day.